Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email us tmosso@the1916company.com for all of your purchase, pricing, and availability questions concerning this watch. Today, we're discussing a well-known model launched in 2006, and as you can see, the Patek Philippe Nautilus Moonphase has not aged a day. It's the classical Gerald Genta design with the addition of complications and the romance of a moonphase. So in terms of the 5712/1A-001, which we have right here, stainless steel, 40 millimeters in diameter, 8.8 millimeters thick. We're just counting the lugs of the case. Then it is 44.4 millimeters across the wrist, but if we include the end link on each side, total distance across the wrist is going to be a bit more. It's 47.8 millimeters. I would say that the 5990, the 5980, and the 5726 are to the Nautilus 5811, 5711, and 5712, what the Royal Oak Offshore is to the Jumbo and the 15510. So those are big Nautiluses. The 5712, the 5711, and the 5811 are the traditional Nautilus in terms of how they wear. So when you put it on the wrist, it feels like a 5711. It doesn't feel big, heavy, and thick. It doesn't feel massive or exaggerated like some of the others, like the annual calendar and the chronographs. On my wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference, it fits identically to a 5711, which means low enough to fit underneath the cuff and narrow enough that I can recommend it for wrists of 14 centimeters circumference or larger. From over the top, which always exaggerates the width of the watch, you can see I still have some distance between the edge of the lugs and the edge of my wrist. The bracelet also has the feel of souplesse and flexibility and delicacy, of real refinement that you get on the 57 and 5811s. So in terms of how it's integrated into the case, you could see Gerald Genta was on a integrated bracelet kick in the 70s when he created the original Nautilus 3700 in 1976. As with his Royal Oak of 72, he had a case that swept down into lugs that tapered down into a diminishing bracelet that appeared fully integrated, as though you've got a timepiece that just happens to be a part of what is otherwise jewelry. That is how Genta saw himself, as a jewelry designer, and his watches were jewelry that happened to tell time. You can also see that we have primary links with a longitudinal satination, then intermediate links with polish. The bevel on the case flank continues down the shoulders of the links, and you can see back at this point in the 5712's existence, we still had screw-fixed removable links, and so around 2011, 2012, this went away, replaced by pin sleeves. While Patek had its reasons, some legitimate, most prefer this older system of fixing removable links because it's easier to size at home with jeweler's screwdrivers. We have a double fold clasp right here. It closes using spring-loaded ceramic pin snaps, and then a clamshell lock with the Calatrava cross on it, which is the emblem of the manufacturer. You can see right there the spring-loaded ceramic pin snap designed to retract a little bit against the pressure of the clamshell, and the steel cannot wear down the ceramic, so the tolerances will remain snappy over time. Taking a look at the case, it's a lot more complex than the Aquanaut, which, along with the challenge of finishing all these parts, partly accounts for the Nautilus being more expensive than equivalent Aquanaut models, which is why, for example, a 5711 was a lot more complicated to assemble than a 5167. So we have three parts: the case back, the mid case, and then the bezel, which includes these modular wings that fold over the edges and then through assembly by screw help to keep this whole thing water resistant and tightly packed. Now with a screw down crown and a 60-meter water resistance, this is safe for surface swimming. It's just not quite as water resistant to, say, a 5711, because we have little pusher adjusters through the case that allow for correction of the calendar and the moon phase. We have a rounded polygon, just like on the Royal Oak, but unlike the Royal Oak, this is perhaps a more fully realized design, as the Royal Oak has the rounded octagonal bezel, but then it has a circular inner bezel, circular dial, and a circular crystal, whereas you can see the outer, inner, crystal, and dial are all the same shape, which is why I've often thought Genta went back to the drawing board with the Nautilus and created the watch he'd originally intended to create when he created the Royal Oak. Now, the dial has a little bit of a gradient fade, light silver at center, darker at the edge, with the striations laterally that have been a feature on the Nautilus since the beginning. The hands and the indices are white gold, so they will not tarnish or oxidize with time. You can turn the light off and see that the watch is quite well loomed. You can approximate some of the times between 3 o'clock and 8 o'clock. There's just enough reference there that you'll be able to wing it. And then we've got a couple of complications, including a power reserve indicator for the 48-hour automatic winding power reserve, a pointer-style date, and then a coaxial moon phase. And so this is an automatic winding watch, but if you wish to play with your power reserve, you can wind it manually and watch the power reserve indicator advance toward 48. The movement in this watch is part of what helps us get a sense of the age. Just like we have the screws in the bracelet, so we know it's roughly pre-2011, you could see that here we have the Patek Philippe seal, but we also have 5-position adjustment, and we have a metal hairspring. And I believe it was right around 2011 that they started integrating the Spiromax silicone hairsprings into the Nautilus line, and it was mid-2009 that they introduced the Patek Philippe seal. So if you know about these things, you can get a sense of how old a watch is without even looking at the box and papers. Now, we've got a 22-karat gold micro rotor that sits on hybrid ceramic bearings, winding a 48-hour power reserve. We have a 3 hertz beat rate, so 21,600 vibrations per hour. Chronometer style 5-position adjustment. We've got a Gyromax style free sprung balance, so all the adjustments for the most part are done using the eccentric masses on the rim. Fine tuning and a very accurate regulation system, but also a very shock tolerant one, developed during the 40s and first implemented by Patek during the early 1950s. As a micro rotor movement, it's as thin as a manual, and it has the open, unobstructed caseback view of a manual, but it gives you the convenience of an automatic. You can see how it helps to thin out the watch in spite of the complications. It's only slightly thicker than a 5711. Now, the finishing here is fine. As you can see, engine turning, you can see stripes, you could see beveling on the edges of the bridges, but also in the jewel sinks. The screw heads are all polished, and then if you look, we have little locating pegs that help to locate some of the bridges on the base plate below, and those pegs have been polished on their tops with brushed satin patterns on the wheels. So it's a good-looking movement, and again, 60 meters water-resistant, all of this pivoting on 29 jewels. If you love this watch, keep in mind that it is a work of art. Every single surface amounting to over 12 hours of total hand finishing, a handmade watch inside and out. A big part of why you buy this watch is not just movement finish, but exterior finish to exacting details. Reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.